Welcome to Inspirational Leadership. I'm your host, Kristen Harcourt. And as always, I have an amazing guest. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Jevon Wooden, who helps leaders and organizations lock their full potential through empathetic leadership and strategic insights. By working closely with his clients, he focuses on driving breakthrough results, whether it's building high performing teams, cultivating innovative cultures, or boosting employee engagement. With a background that spans military service, business leadership, and experience with top global organizations, he blends data driven strategies with empathy to transform leadership and team dynamics. His personal journey from facing significant adversity as a teen to earning the Bronze Star for leadership under pressure shapes the authentic guidance he offers. Jevon is passionate about helping leaders and teams embrace growth, achieve their highest potential, and create thriving, purpose-driven workplaces. Welcome to the show, Jevon.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Kristen. I know we're about to have a lot of fun.
Yes, fun is the word. And everybody, workplaces are also supposed to be fun and have some play. Okay. So our episode will be
Yes,
like that too. Um,
absolutely.
so, Jevon, I think as a starting point, it's always amazing for people to hear a little bit more about your story and your journey and what got you to the work you're doing today. I specifically, of course, being anyone who's been listening to the show knows that I am insatiably curious. So I want to know more about what went on in the teen years and everything, but you start wherever you'd like. We'd love to hear more about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, my story is a very complex one. And so I'll start just by saying, like, I grew up in Rochester, New York. I grew up in an impoverished home. We didn't have a lot. I'm the middle child of five. My mother did amazing things to even give us opportunities. I actually grew up in a polygamous household. So my mom was wife number two, not legally, but that's just how we grew up. Right. So that impacted the perception of love, that impacted, how relationships should go and flourish in my latter years. And at 17, because we grew up poor, I wanted more. I said, you know what? I hate this life. This is not for me. I struggled with confidence because I seen all the other kids coming with new gear every school year. And I'm like, I'm wearing the same 3 pairs of pants and 5 shirts every week. So I ended up getting into trouble. At 17 years old, I faced 7 years in prison and I had to sit in a jail cell for a few months. But that time really opened up some things for me. I sat in there and I realized that that was not the life for me. And value was not aligned with just monetary value, that I was worth so much more intrinsically. And I realized that because my mother my mother and my older sister, Chandra, they came in to visit me one day while I was in there. And when we sat in that visitation room and I couldn't touch them, that was the first realization that I need to get out of here somehow. And then when my mom said, I put up the house so you can get a lawyer so you don't have to have a public defender, because we know what happens when people get public defenders. So that was like, wow, that meant that if anything was to go awry, that my mother and my sisters would be homeless because they would have no home to stay in. So that just hit me. And I was like, wow, here it is, putting all this pain on the people I love, trying to take them out of pain. So I thought. So I went up in my jail cell that night and I really got closer to God that moment. And I asked, for a way to just rectify what I had done and give me a second opportunity. And when I got into that courtroom, the judge said, I don't see you as a criminal. He said, I see more in you. Your grades are good. You're actually one of the top people in your class. And I know you're destined for more. This is not your path. But if I see you in here again, you will be doing that time. So they gave me another chance. And that chance, I took it and ran with it. So over that time, spent time in the military, that you mentioned, received the Bronze Star. That's an award I wouldn't want, but I got it. And I've just spent all this time really impacting people in a positive way.
Wow, my goodness. I was getting goosebumps and shivers the whole time you were talking because it's these moments, these catalyst moments that the path can go one way or another way. And I'm so glad something for you clicked when you start to think around, wow, like financially, if I do this again, they could be out of a home. That's what you needed to make it to really make you have that click. And I say that because I think there's so many people that want to go on the other pathway, but they just don't have that click, that thing that creates that shift. And I'm so glad that happened for you. And so you got to this point, and then you started to think about, all right, what's your career direction going to be? Like, what got you into the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, this was a winding road, as most of us journey. Right? So, as I said, went into the military. I spent most of my time as a reservist, about 8 years reserve, 4 years active. But I kept deploying, and I was like, okay, that's not for me anymore. I don't want to do this military thing. I'm looking for more stability. What can I do? And at that moment, I was doing tech. I have a cybersecurity background, doing security architecture, but that wasn't for me either. Paid the bills very well, but it did not feed my soul. So I had to look at something else. And actually, on my last deployment to Afghanistan in 2016, about the end of 2016, early 2017, I looked and I Googled, what can I do besides motivational speaking to impact people's lives? And coaching popped up. It was one of the options. So I went down this rabbit hole looking at what coaching really was, because I looked at it as sports. They have coaches, but it's actually different than that. So I found International Coach Federation, and I went through all the training and did all these things and realized that that was the path for me. So I founded this organization again while I was in Afghanistan that I'm running today. It was formerly called Live Not Loathe, but it is now Bright Mind Consulting Group, and it is as if you said on the intro, looking to help people unlock their potential, but also take it a step further to help them unlock others' potential as
Yeah.
leaders. So that's really what got me on this path. I knew that, my purpose was to impact people using my stories and my insights and my intuition. And that's what I'm doing today.
Love it. Love it. So, the show is called Inspirational Leadership. And I think there's so many different on your pathway and your journey that you've already shared where you've had opportunities. I would assume, being in the military, that there's going to be a lot of leadership lessons that come from that. What are some of the things that really jumped out at you when it comes to positive leadership lessons that came out of your work and time in the military?
Absolutely. I mean, so many, Kristen. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is the power of diversity. Diverse thinking, diverse perspectives, diverse experiences, diverse everything. Because when you're in the military, you look to your left and the right, and it's a really a melting pot of so many differences in every single aspect. So having that is the reason why we consider the U.S. Army, one of the greatest fighting forces in the world, is because the diverse thinking and being able to combine all of that to create the awesomeness and ideas and innovation that we see day in and day out. The other lesson that I learned was that collaboration is really key when it comes to success. It
Yeah.
is, you hear the saying that success is lonely, it's lonely at the top. I beg to differ when you do it right. I feel like collaboration really allows you to expedite that success, and it allows you to get this force multiplier on things that you're not necessarily well versed in. But to
Mm-hmm.
do that, you have to be open, and that
Mm-hmm.
means you have to be vulnerable. So even
Mm-hmm.
us in the military, we learn the power of vulnerability to say, I have to depend on that person to the left and my right, and I have to be willing to tell them when I'm not at my best because it can literally be a life and death situation.
Yeah, I was going to say it. In this case, actually, your life depends on it. But I love
Absolutely.
what you just shared there in terms of the power of vulnerability. Some of the leaders I've really admired, I mean, Oprah said this many times that she would say, like, I am not supposed to be the smartest person in the room. And I would always surround myself with lots of different people who have skill sets that I don't have. But there's a
Right.
level of humility there that you're saying, I'm not supposed to be able to do it all, that I'm supposed to have these gifts and talents, and then surround myself with other people who have gifts and talents. And then we're all collaboratively working together towards these common goals, which, first of all, so much more powerful in terms of achieving those goals when you're doing it together than a lone wolf. And it's kind of beautiful to be with community and getting to be able to
For
do
sure.
things with others.
Absolutely. Community, you mentioned that word community. And that's what I'm seeing is really struggling, especially in these virtual spaces in business and organizations today. They're not sure how to create this feeling of community.
Yeah.
And we're not I never like when people say, oh, we're a family here, because you're not a family at work, but you can be a community where you support one another. Everyone feels like they're valued. Everyone has psychological safety to share their experiences and their thoughts. And that's where we're falling on our faces, so to speak, in leadership today. And what we need to do at this time is really take a step back
Yeah.
and stop internalizing when someone says things aren't going well.
Mm,
We're taking it personally. We have to listen and see, okay, why isn't it going well? Ask for insights from others. We mentioned that vulnerability. Feedback is one of the strongest things and lessons I've learned in the military. All right, and we do something called an after action report after a mission or after some training. We'll
yeah.
say what's going well, what do we need to get rid of because it's just not working.
Yeah.
What can we sustain, right? What went great that we can kind of keep, and then what are some lessons, what are we not seeing that could be a possibility for us? And when you have that perspective, and you're not having the leader say these things, you're having everyone else say these things. When you do that, it just opens so many doors. So we really have to take it to the bare bones in leadership right now, Kristen, and get that feedback, so we can find out what we're doing well and what we need to change, and then what we need to implement that we're not seeing.
There's two things I think are so important with what you said, and I don't want to lose both threads. So I'm going to say it out loud, both of them, and then I'll tell you two different directions. One is I really appreciate what you said around the family and community. And then I want to talk about asking for insight and then actually doing something with the insight, because I've heard engagement surveys not done very well. So first of all, on the family community, I really wanted to highlight what you said there because I think it's really important. I have heard many organizations say, oh, yes, to come work here, it's like we're all a family. And what they're not thinking about, that I think is a really important thing that I want to highlight right now, is not everybody's had a positive experience with their family of origin. So saying that we're a family here is actually quite triggering and traumatizing for them. So they don't actually want to be with their
That's true.
family at work is, one thing I want to highlight. And then the other piece as well, right? There's when you're part of a family and the commitment and the expectations, I think, again, we have to remember like work life integration. Like you aren't supposed to be sacrificing elements of yourself that maybe you would in other ways for a family. And that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing because there's a different dynamic at play there. So I just really wanted to highlight that. I think it's really important. But I want to hear what are some of your perspectives as well around why we should be perhaps labeling it as community instead of family.
Yeah, I mean exactly what you said. And also, for family, you don't necessarily be like, hey, I need to let you go. Like,
Yes.
I
Bye.
have this budget cut, that's going on. Hey, I see you later, right? So we have to really be careful about the language that we're leveraging here. It sounded great when it was first said, oh, this is a family-oriented organization and all this other stuff, but it's really not, right? It's still work, it's still business to be done, and we have tough decisions to make. And a lot of people, when they say family oriented, they still don't feel like they're authentic selves.
Right.
So when we look at it from a community aspect, we're saying you can be yourself. We want you to bring your authenticity, but also understand that we have to get some things done. So it's really a people first to get results mentality without overdoing it, all right, when it comes to the language.
Yeah, you're right. Because as you were saying that too, it's making me think about there's a boundary piece here too, right? Like I always talk about when we're really doing leadership well, you're integrating compassion and empathy, but also with assertiveness and accountability, right? Because you
Mhm,
are running
mhm.
a business. This isn't a nonprofit, which I'd say even a nonprofit should be perhaps a bit more business oriented to
For
get the
sure,
results
for
that
sure.
they need. And what I see is a lot of times leaders are overcompensating on one or the other. Sometimes there's so much empathy and compassion, but there's not enough having direct conversations with care and saying what needs to be
Mhm.
said and being direct, or too much directness that's done in more of an aggressive, not an assertive way, that there's not care felt for that human.
Yeah, what I will say is like empathy is always a good thing, but some people confuse empathy with being um, non-confrontational,
Right.
and it's not the same. So empathy, you will tell the truth, you will hold that person accountable, and you will be transparent in your communication, but you do it with tact, and
Yeah.
you consider their communication styles and
Yeah.
that they're also a human. So I can say the difficult things as an empathetic leader. I can
Mm.
say, you know what, I'm sorry, but we've tried a lot of different things, but we're gonna have to make some cuts. And unfortunately, your department or your position, we're gonna have to cut it. But what we're going to do is ensure that you're not left high and dry. We're going to give you severance for a few months. We're going to give you a resume review to make sure that you're still marketable, and we're willing to give you a fantastic review. So that's an empathetic leader versus someone who's too assertive to say, "Hey, we've seen it. We've seen it virtual." They just be like, "Hey, by the way, you're all gone." And your check will be in the mail, and we'll
Yeah.
see you later.
Yeah.
That's the difference between an empathetic leader and someone who's assertive, who has no empathy at all
Yeah.
or lacks emotional intelligence. So we
Yeah.
can always be empathetic, but we don't have to necessarily be non-confrontational.
Yeah, I think that's really important with what you said. There's, to me, the empathy is taking the humanity around how you're addressing situations. I also think of empathy, what you need to be cognizant of if someone, we talk about sometimes people who are empaths, and my experience is a lot of HR leaders can be those empaths. And what they have
Mhm,
to be careful of is not taking something on as if it's theirs to take on, right? So, somebody else's experience, you can have so much compassion and care for what they're going through, give them
mhm.
tools. But if you're constantly taking it on as if it's yours to take on, then we start to feel this empathy and compassion fatigue.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Kristen. And that's I love that you mentioned an empath. So the difference between an empath and someone who's empathetic is someone who's an empath, they internalize everything and they personalize, and they feel as if it's them, and they just it really distorts their perspective of what's going on, right? Because they're looking at it from that emotional standpoint.
Yeah.
Where someone who's empathetic, they have detached from it being their plight, but they're able to foresee how their decisions or how what's going on can impact that other person. And that's really the superpower of being an empathetic leader, is being able to foresee, being able to ask the necessary questions, being able to see other options before you get to that final consequence of, say, letting someone go.
Yeah.
And that's the difference, right? So there's a great example of an empathetic leader in the CEO, the former CEO of Costco,
Mm.
who even in economic downturns, he always said, you know what, I am going to lean in, all in on my people. I'm going to give them raises during hard times. I'm going to make sure they have the proper benefits. I'm going to do all these things because I understand that they are the drivers of my results. And what happened for them is they became one of the top companies in the world when it comes to their wholesale department stores.
Yeah.
Whereas you look at Sam's, they actually went the other way because they were the ones cutting people. They had zero continuity among
Yeah.
leadership and decision makers. No one felt safe, so they would call in and try to find other work and all that other stuff. So
Yeah.
there's really power in being an empathetic leader, but we have to be careful about tapping into the empathic leader side.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think it's so important. And what you with those examples you just gave around the CEOs, I think it's also a big difference between being a reactive leader and being a responsive leader, which is not okay.
Mhm,
This is happening, but we have to be still take long term thinking in our approach and not just be completely reactive. And then all of a sudden, oh, we're doing all of this. That the long term impact is huge. And I'm
mhm,
curious. This is just coming up for me in this moment when you're talking about that, your thoughts on, I've seen a big trends over the last 3 to 6 months of organizations who were previously okay with people working from home 2 to 3 days a week to go from 4 days, 5 days. Um, and I believe, they might have their reasons behind it, but I
mhm.
believe the way they are approaching it, the way they're communicating it to the organization is not feeling very empathetic. What are your thoughts on that?
Wholeheartedly agree. I mean, and for me, it's kind of interesting because there's so many benefits for organizations to have like a hybrid environment. You get to source talent that you wouldn't other have readily available in that area, right? Again, diverse perspectives, diverse experiences, all these other things. You save on real estate costs because you don't have to lease all these huge buildings anymore.
Yeah.
There's a lot of benefits, right? The risk goes down for people having to travel long distances every day. But I feel like, there's a way to do it. And yeah, I think that how they're doing it and how they're communicating it is just all wrong. To say, hey, you have to come in or we're going to let you go, right? I just do not agree with that at all. Phased approach, fine. If you say, okay, we're going to have to do this because of X reasons, we want to get back to innovation, some of them are saying, and all this other stuff. How does me being in the office do that? Because I might be someone who works way better, from my solitude, being
Yeah.
able to really focus in without having someone come to my desk and start talking
Yeah.
about nothing. Right.
Yeah.
So you really have to think about that from a perspective. Are you just saying it just because it's a power trip? Or are you saying it for a legitimate reason? And then what are those legitimate reasons? Because a part of being an empathetic leader is to be transparent, and really to give people the rationale behind some of your decisions. They don't necessarily have to agree with it. It's
Mm.
not saying that, because if you have to make a decision, you have to make a decision. But giving them the rationale, and then not saying, hey, or else.
Right.
Like why?
Yeah.
If you look at that, that's really not a way for you to sustain your business for 10 plus years. You're not going to be here for long, because without people, who's going to do the work? And top talent is not going to want to stay in that environment where you're saying, hey, or else. They're gonna be like, I have options. I can go elsewhere. I don't have to
Exactly.
put up with this. All
Yeah.
right. So there's really this fight going on internally with how these organizations are operating. And some of them have had remote capabilities for a while. We're seeing a lot of companies, tech companies, who have remote capabilities for a while. And they're just saying, hey, we just bought this amazing building that we have to fill now. So we
Yeah.
need we need you to come
Right.
back.
Right.
So they really have to look at it from a long-term perspective, to say, what is this costing us and what do we gain from having all these people come back into the office?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that the one with you either come or you're out of a job is very fear-based. And this is not going to, again, very reactive, short-term
Yeah.
thinking. You're going to lose top talent. I think from a bigger picture, I see multiple things going on. And this kind of goes back nicely to what we were talking about in terms of asking your workforce feedback and actually doing something with it. I'm curious if some of these organizations who are now all of a sudden going to 5 days a week, did you actually survey your employees and ask them how they felt about it and what some of their concerns were? So that,
Mhm.
first of all, when you're communicating, you're addressing those concerns. And then, secondly, maybe when you start to hear what some of those concerns are, perhaps some of your beliefs. Again, the innovation one, which I hear comes up a lot. There's going to be the water cooler discussions and all of this stuff, which again, they could still do that when they're doing it 2 to 3 days, not 5 days a week. And
Right.
and I did speak to an organization with the CEO who had another one of their divisions. The CEO was really struggling with it. And I said, here's something to keep in mind. Your next generations, Gen Z, they're not going to work for you. They're going to say that's deal breaker. So you're not even going to get them in the door, never mind having them go. But what I would say, it's going back to what you were talking about in terms of surveying and getting feedback. What I've seen also, which I find quite demoralizing and demotivating, is they ask the questions, they get the insight. People are actually saying, okay, I'm going to give you some feedback. And I've been in rooms with the leaders who are like arguing. Well, no, that's not true. Like,
Yeah.
that's not how I act, or I don't believe it's like, I'm sorry, your workforce is taking the time to give you the feedback and you are arguing with the feedback.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I've seen that. Or what they do to get positive feedback is they make people put in like their employee ID number or something like
Right.
that. People aren't going to give you the real thoughts if they know you can identify them. It's like, what do you think this is? Like, you're not about to catch me and get rid of me, and some retaliation stuff. So yeah, there's so many things there, Kristen, and it's and then they also can look at metrics. A lot of them track productivity metrics, right? And a lot of them, you will find times that, because we're giving them the option, right? Not saying they're 100% remote all the time, but you give them the option to say, yeah, I'll come in, these couple of days, that flexible work arrangements. They're more productive in that way. Because to be honest, I speak to a lot of people who are like, I want to go back in the office.
Yeah.
Not every day, but I want to go back in the office to get that. And so if you allow people to naturally select their thing, you will find that you will still get what you want as a leader. but you
Right.
cannot just force people. We're all adults here, and this is
Yeah.
the 21st century. So people don't just stay at organizations just to say they've been with a company for 20 years, right? That does not work because we've realized that companies are not loyal to us, right? So you have to make sure that you're taking into account their feelings and their considerations and see why they want to stay home, those couple of
Exactly.
days. Because it's childcare is expensive. A lot of people have children. Some people have, parents that they have to take care of. There's so many reasons. It's not just because, oh, it's nice to be able to pop up on my couch, pull up my
Mhm.
computer and do
Mhm.
laundry while I'm working. There's so many very real reasons why people want to stay home or may need to stay home on some cases.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think you ask the questions and start to work with and I'm also going to acknowledge that I believe underneath that there some of it is again fear-based and lack of trust because there's
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
narrative being created around they're
That's it.
somehow again, I don't know what they believe that they're doing at home because the same things that they could be doing, they're doing in the office anyways, but it
Right.
comes to the
Everything is done on
trust,
a computer these days now anyway,
right?
pretty
I
much,
mean, it's the
unless you work in
trust.
manufacturing or something.
Yes, yes, and if
Yeah.
anybody is listening and you're doing the thing where you're tracking every single second of how often somebody is at their computer, please stop this. Like, again, to
Right.
speak to what Jevon was saying around that we're all adults here, productivity is not always about a bum on a seat. Like, there are some people who they're in their flow, their focus, could get more done in 45 minutes than some people could get in 3 hours. So, as long as they're
Absolutely.
getting the outcomes, being so super focused on micromanaging somebody being at their computer, if anybody is listening to this, please stop. And if you're HR and you're listening to this, please go talk to the CEO. And you will not find it will be very easy for you to find some research and data to support how counter unproductive that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're doing that, how much time are you spending looking at these reports? It's like, oh, this person wasn't there. Oh, this person, like, why not just look at the output? Like, the
Yes.
body of work speaks for itself. If they're being asked to do these things, and you know what? Sadly, a lot of people ask for more work and they aren't given it.
Yeah.
They'll say, "Oh, yeah, we don't have anything for you right now." And these
Right.
people are very eager. And then what happens is they get assimilated into that culture. And they're like, "Oh, you don't want to give me more work. I'll just go get another job while I'm working here, right? Or I'll start this organization." So it's not by fault of their own. They're just looking. They're very eager. They have goals that the organization is not supporting. So if you want people to be there all day, every day, I don't know what to tell you, right? Because how much work do you actually have? Like, if people have that, if they have the time to fill, then they will. But most organizations, most jobs are not going to require 8 hours filled with work all day, every day. I don't see it. And if it is, now you're talking about coming close to being burned out because a human is not meant to be like a cog in a wheel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, Javon. And that's another dialogue because what I've been seeing a lot with the workplaces and the ones I've been working with in North America, which I would say automotive, manufacturing, finance, healthcare, I'm seeing the other side, which is
Mhm.
the getting very close to burnout because they're
Yep.
under resourced. They're not hiring new people in. They're having two people. It really requires two people do the job. They're letting one
Yep.
person go, and now one person's doing two people's jobs, and the people are drowning. They're drowning. They're sharing that they're drowning, and this is also not a way we want to run our workplaces.
Right. Right. Yeah. And manufacturing, construction, I've been doing a lot in the construction industry as of late. And that leads to some very, very serious issues.
Yeah.
Construction is facing a multitude, one of which is the second highest suicide rate out of all industries. And then the other is they have a high opioid addiction death rate. Right.
Right.
And that's all geared towards people pushing themselves to the point of exhaustion. They're
Yes.
hurting themselves. They're
Yes.
not able to focus. There's a lot of mistakes taking place, right? So
Yeah.
what is really the benefit? There's a law of diminishing returns here, right? If
Exactly.
you keep pushing people, eventually that productivity is going to go down instead of
Yeah.
up the more hours they work.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I think it's a really important shift, a mindset shift that we really have to be aware of. So, Jevon, when you think about some of the leaders that you have had in your lifetime that have been individuals you would really describe as inspirational leaders, people who were perhaps mentors, role models, people that you looked up to, really that you thought, I want to emulate what I see in you. And those leaders might have not even been in workplaces. Those could be leaders in schools. Those could be leaders in
Mhm.
your church community, many different areas. In military, of course. Who jumps out at you, or who are the couple of leaders that have had big impact on you?
Man, I have a few. I've been blessed with some great leaders. There was a colonel when I had first arrived on my third deployment in Afghanistan who just really jumped out at me. And what stood out for him was Colonel Mundo. If you're listening, I'm talking about you.
Yeah,
But what stood out to me about him was one, he wore a high rank, but he didn't act proud like that high rank, right? He was very personable. He led by listening. He would get us involved in the decision making, and if it called for it, he would roll up his sleeves and he would get it done with us.
yeah,
And if someone made a mistake, he looked at it as a learning lesson versus something that where he needed to yell or get out of character on. He's like, hey, what was the thought process behind that? How could I have better supported you
mm,
to ensure that you were prepared and ensure your success? So it was really about taking ownership of the
mm,
success of whatever we had to get done and holding himself accountable to say, hey, there was something that I missed. Maybe I could have done a little better to prepare you. Maybe you need some training, whatever.
yeah,
So that really stood out for me. And he always did everything at a high standard. He never cut corners. He spent a lot of time on the preparations phase of everything he did. He was the first to get up, and he would give you ownership. He would be like, "Hey, I know you're an E4. I know you're a lower rank, but
yeah,
I'm not going to treat you like that. I'm gonna give you the rank two levels above you. I'm gonna give you that work so you can do that. So here's your task. You're a leader too, right?
yeah.
Get it done. And if you need help, here I am. So
Wow.
I feel like that's very important these days. We don't see that very often. Right now, leaders are just getting thrown in. People leaders are just getting thrown in, and a lot of them come from technical backgrounds, so they're not necessarily used to the skill set that it's going to take to be effective in that position. So we are really doing a disservice by not training them up, to prepare them, getting that succession plan in place, giving them a development plan so they can be ready for those roles, and even finding out if that's something that they're interested in.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
so there's a lot that I learned from him. And there's a few others. My guy Russ, he was the first person to give me a shot in the private sector as a cybersecurity professional.
yeah.
And he said, you know what? To be honest, like you weren't the highest technical person, but I gave you a shot because of your personality and when you
Attitude.
came in here, you left an indelible mark on everyone.
Yeah,
And I see how you come in here with zest and vigor, and you said hello to everyone, right? So he's seen past the role, he's seen the person. So
yeah,
that showed me a lot about, sometimes, we can teach a lot of the technical components of these roles, but you cannot teach culture and you cannot teach behaviors, right? So that was very important to me to say, you know what? A lot of times we just throw people in things because maybe that was their background, they went to school for it. But what if we gave them a shot elsewhere? What if we saw them for them and saw the strengths? Maybe they don't even see it, and we give them a shot at something else where they could really be a fit and really flourish.
yeah.
So I just learned a lot of lessons from those two.
Amazing. Yeah, I love your first example, like the humility that comes with that.
Mhm.
And not feeling like, oh, like rolling up the sleeves and being able to be part of it. But then also when you were talking about seeing that potential empowering you to work towards these parts that were above where you were at yet, but that is stretching you. And people love to hit their edges, right? That's how you reach your potential. I want to reposition that for a second. You might not love it when you're in it because it's a bit messy, uncomfortable because you're getting outside of your comfort zone. But there's when it's done in the right way, when it's not going too far out of your edges, but just that nice sweet spot, then you get to feel that flow and that ability to like, oh, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm in it and evolving.
Absolutely. I mean, you only grow in discomfort.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
got to push those, the boundaries that we're pushing, like just a little bit at a time, right? You keep pushing that boundary out further and further. And next thing you know, you're making a huge impact.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to give you a magic wand, and you get to use this magic wand in a workplace. And you say, these are the things that I would like to change most. It could be the overall workplace and the culture, or what you would like to change more in terms of supporting leaders. What would you like to see happen with that magic wand? Where is there opportunities for significant changes to happen?
Yeah, one is preparing leaders better, not just throwing them into the fire and expecting them to be great people leaders. I would love to see leaders need to take training on and not computer-based training. When I say
Yes.
training,
These are not technical
emotional
skills.
intelligence. Yeah, some training on being an emotionally intelligent leader,
Yeah.
training on difficult conversations,
Yes.
training on giving and receiving feedback, and then training on how to best support your resources. Not having the answer right all the time, but giving your people space to find the answer within themselves. Because that's where a lot of the stress is coming from in leadership, and by proxy, the cultures are really suffering it from it. Leaders feel like they have to have all the answers. Leaders, a lot of them have not detached from that the do it mentality and being able to give people and delegate properly. And then a lot of them struggle with difficult conversations. They
Yeah.
just do not, they can't do it. And that's where we get the people saying, hey, we got to let you go. See you. Because
Yes.
they've never had training on that. So they get uncomfortable and they're like, oh, I'm just gonna throw it out there. Right. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we really need to focus on that human centered aspect of being a leader. The technical component, yeah, we'll get that. Right. But the human centered
Exactly.
aspect of being a leader is really the key. And then the other place that I would love to see that magic wand used is taking care of supporting your people. A lot of organizations are like, oh, I throw in their total compensation, I'm throwing all these benefits at them, I'm paying them. Why is it that I'm not getting what I need out of these folks? So I want that feedback. I want them to actually listen, like we were saying, listen to the people, see what they're saying, get insights from it. In some of the organizations I've gone into, from a cultural transformation standpoint, one of the things that they're implementing now is like a menu of benefits, not just throwing benefits at people, but allowing
Yeah.
people to select some of the benefits that align with their values and what's important for them. So that's another thing I would like to see.
Yeah, I love that. It's like really listen and hear, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden you're seen as an employer of choice because it's not just here's the benefits everyone has a one size fits all. It's like we want to address what's going to serve you best. We want to make sure that your needs are met. And
Mhm.
I think we can't overemphasize listening and doing something with the listening, how important that is to culture. I agree with you completely as someone who also specializes in emotional intelligence and humanizing the workplace. When it really comes down to it, it doesn't really matter what your business outcomes are. You have a whole bunch of humans working together to get those business outcomes. I don't care what field you're in. I've been across every industry. You are always having humans working together to achieve whatever those goals or outcomes are. And for sure, it's not like I want an engineer, someone who's supposed to be an engineer that's not an engineer working on a bridge and I'm driving across that bridge. Sure, I want technical skills. Yes.
Right.
This is just the barrier to this is just entry. Like everyone, of course, needs the technical skills and will continue to have that. But my experience is like you, we've got many people who were individual contributors, have very strong technical skills. They move into leadership. And let's not blame them when they've moved into leadership and no one has helped them to understand, oh, this is how you have a difficult conversation. This is how you give feedback. This is how you coach, as opposed to going in and feeling like you need to have the answers. A leader
Mhm.
actually shouldn't be constantly going in with the solutions. They should be asking questions to help that individual learn the skills to become more resourceful. And the good news is these are all learnable skills. These are all
Absolutely.
things. It's not like you either have it or you don't. Even when I think about role playing, which essentially I think sometimes leaders hear role playing, they get a little triggered because I think it brings them back to like drama in grade 10 or grade 5. And they're like, I don't want to do role play. I'm like, all we're doing in role play is really practicing having a conversation. And when you
Right.
start to practice it and realize, like, oh, this is what it looks like to get it in my body. And oh, it's okay. You don't have to go in and have everything. You can have some bullet notes to help prepare you to make yourself feel more comfortable. I think when they start to even learn what this is all about, they feel such relief because they're struggling and feeling so much stress constantly doing this part of the job, but not feeling like they know how to do this part of the job.
No, 100%. And I like role playing because in the military we said train as you fight.
Yes.
And when you role play, that's pretty much what you're doing. You're going through those motions. You're putting a real scenario and situation in there so you can prep and ensure that you're ready when it does happen, right? So if a leader role plays that difficult conversation, they're going to be a lot better prepared when they win, not if, but when they'll have to
Yes.
have that, because that's just a part of leadership. And learning to lead is something that we all should go for, right?
Yes.
Because you can always be a better leader. And those foundational skills, it's just like in sports, like the greatest players continue to work on the foundations. Leaders should do the same. So I feel like we should never feel like we're just at this level where we don't have to work on our communication skills. We don't have to work on, being emotionally intelligent leader. We don't have to work on delegation. All these things are foundational, but we can get better at them.
Exactly. And whether you're a leader by title or not, we are all leaders. We're leaders in our
Absolutely.
lives. We're leaders in how we show up in our communities, in our families, in our workplaces. And I talk all the time about this. It's not just about what you're doing in terms of the actions. It's around taking it back a step and intentionally thinking about who you're being and asking yourself how you want to be and how you want to show up every day. What a
Mhm.
powerful opportunity to impact the people around you.
Yeah, John Maxwell said it best. Leadership is influence. So,
Yes.
so
Yes.
that's really what it boils down to. So we are
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
influencing, even whether we know it or not, in
Mhm.
some way.
Yeah, we're always having that influence, and good or bad. So I could feel like we could keep on talking, but as we get to the
Absolutely.
end of today's episode, I always like to give you, my guests, an opportunity to leave whatever is showing up for you in this moment as a final thought.
Yeah, I just want people to know that, when you better take care of your people, you get better results. So we need to ensure that we are supporting, we are listening, we are leading. Really, a true leader is going to do that, and a true leader understands that your job is not to know everything or do everything well. You have the people in your organization to make you better, and your success is tied to them. So treat them well, support them well, and they will definitely treat you well. And that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think that's such good words of wisdom. Javon, where can people learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
Yes, so LinkedIn for sure. You can go ahead and search my name. You'll see a light bulb next to it. Connect with me. Don't just follow. Hit the connect button,
Yeah.
and send me a message. Let me know that you heard me here, and that Kristen Kristen pointed you in this direction. And you can also go to my website, JevonWooden.com, and send me a message through there.
Amazing. And I will have all of that in the show notes. Thank you, Javon, so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kristen. Like I said at the outset, this was very fun, and very impactful.
Yes, I'm going to be smiling all day. These conversations are so energizing for me as well. And for everyone, if you enjoyed this episode, please share with others. And thanks so much for your reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you would like to develop more confident and emotionally intelligent leaders in your organization, let's connect. I can share more about my one on one coaching, transformational keynotes, and ongoing leadership training. From my heart to yours, sending tons of love. Bye bye.